today's practice was obviously more focused on the preseason game coming up against New Orleans. Our plan is to play our starters for 8 to 10 plays, depending, and that's not just etched in stone. And then get into our second phase and third phase. I've said this each week. There's still some real important decisions to be made. I just told Dave a story in New York, what was preseason week 4. We were down to a couple players, and Brashear Livingston was a returned to kickoff for a touchdown in that game. And 3 days later, next week, we're in that final cut-down meeting, front office, coaches, the late Wellington Mara, I'll never forget it. He was very quiet, and we were discussing a defensive lineman or Brashear Livingston. We were down to this last decision, and Wellington said, it's be hard to take points off the board. And, his kick return for a touchdown was the reason he made the team that year. So we'll leave out tomorrow and then get ready to go. Any questions? He's fine. We held him out, just soft tissue. He's fine. We anticipate him playing.
Sean, with Devon Bailey, it's just kind of
Yeah, so let's go through that. Look, I asked Paul, my assistant, find out how many players I've traded or been involved in a trade with. And Devon was the 26th player. The interesting thing with him was 2 and then a third team all called. In other words, we weren't actively shopping at all. But teams in need of receivers obviously do a good enough job. They look at the depth of certain teams. And so within like a 3-day period, George and I had gotten calls from 2 serious teams and a third, and all coincidentally on the same player. And look, George would know better the initial offer or what the compensation would be. And the next morning, he and I sat down and said, no, that obviously we value this player. And then the following day, it picked up. It became more serious, and then we're having to look at the roster as a whole and trying to find the right and the best 53. But the thing different, and I looked over those trades, those other 25, and 90% of them were easy trades to make, meaning there wasn't the right fit for whatever reason, but there. And then there's that 10% that are difficult. This was one of those 10% that, man, all the things that we look for: discipline, structure, smart, tough, talented. That's why this one was difficult. And certainly New Orleans was looking, just talking with Mickey, they felt they were missing a bigger receiver. They knew we had a number of big receivers. And so it kind of went in the beginning of the week is just discussion. And then 2 teams really came back more than serious about this trade. And there is a point at some point where you're looking at the roster, you're looking at your depth, and towards the end, it was something we felt was going to be best for the club. He was fantastic when we visited with him. He's gonna be a real good player for them, and so those are the tough ones. And really, I was only able to come up with like 2 that were like that. Darren Sproles was a real tough decision, and I later regretted it, and so. But most of the time, they're easier, but we wish them well.
You mentioned the depth. but what have you seen with Troy's progression?
Yeah, certainly all of that. When you guys factor in where Troy's at, where Pat's at, where Sherfield's at, where, and we can keep 6 receivers. We're probably only going to get 5 to the game. And look, he may have been going to the game, but there would have been discussion as to, out of the 6, how are we looking at our game day? And so I said this a few weeks ago. I think we have a few players here that may end up playing for other teams, and here's one.
Do you think you'll get any other interest, or have you gotten other interest with other guys?
Yeah, none. I mean, we haven't received any other interest in now. We're not. We haven't reached out and began the process of because we're deep and there's still a lot of good competition going on, but it was unique.
With Devon, how much, if you have to trade him, how much did it mean to you to get him to a place where Mickey, the organization, that they'll do right by him because you know?
Well, that factors in Jacksonville, and ultimately, it's the best compensation. And when it became a 4 and a 7, that was, certainly something that I think George and I both knew if it became a 4, that's something we would do.
Will the turf have any factor in Greenlaw and Benito?
No, it won't have a factor if I choose to play either of the two, both of them, or neither of them. We're going to play on that. And no, so the answer would be no.
How does the depth you have on this roster compare to depth you've had on previous teams entering the cut then?
Yeah, I would say, well, first, we're deeper than our prior teams here, and then I lose track of the 16 years. I know there was years there where we felt a lot of depth, and other years when you get into paying a Super Bowl team, and then it becomes harder to have a deep team as well. That's a bigger challenge. For us, it started a year ago with young players, developing young players, bringing in a few free agents, having another good draft, and it's a young team, and so it's built differently. But I would say it's a very good problem to have, and these guys understand that it's not just the position here with this team. You're putting tape together for the other 31 teams, and I think they know it.
Sean, and then since with Bailey, since it's the Saints and not any of the other 31 teams, I understand that George is probably talking to people more than you are this time of year. Because it's the Saints specifically, are you involved in this a little more talking to me?
I think it was just more George and I both. I mean, George and Mickey know each other well, and I think there's more coincidence here than if you guys looked at it and said, oh, there's a fit because I used to. I think if I was in Alaska and the Saints were looking at whoever was taking the call here, they had interest in that type of a player. So I think that was more happenstance. And George and I both spoke with Mickey, and he and I, we'll speak 2, 3, 4 times daily, not about trades necessarily. It might be roster, scheduling, anything. And in this case, this kind of came up on us and came up pretty quickly, and the timing of not just one but more than one seeing the same player was unusual.
Coach, I saw you talking to Rod Smith during a little bit of practice today. What was it like having him here, and how important is it to have? You talked about Super Bowl.
Fantastic. And his story, I told him I would have loved to have been able to coach you because, all the stories, I've heard, his toughness, his unselfishness, his journey. That's inspiring. And I didn't realize he was still playing in that first game here at the new stadium, the day before 9/11. He was still on that team. And we chatted about that for a little bit. But he's got a big personality, and you can just feel being around him, his passion for this team, and the fans here. So, I love when these guys come around.
A lot of your second and third team offensive linemen, they're splitting time at different positions with those groups. How valuable is that for evaluating on your depth?
I think it's real important. If you're an interior player, how much flex do you have? Can you play center? Is it, interior guard? And if you're a tackle, are you right side only? Like, the more you can do, efficiently, the better. And so Zach and those guys have done a good job of rotating these guys throughout the course of a game.
Sean, what have you seen from Jordan Jackson in camp, and how difficult is it to kind of evaluate the depth on that team?
Yeah, listen, he's been productive, and we've had experience with him, and so he's working his tail off and competing. He's a guy that the time we've had with him, and then the camp he's having, he's doing good.
Coach, will you call plays this week? Someone else?
No, I will. I will. Yep.
With Bailey, just in terms of, obviously you talked about if it got to a fourth, with where the compensation ended up, you said, the teams came in. Does it catch you up, not off guard, but like, how uncommon is it to have one player who all of a sudden sort of becomes, someone that multiple teams are after?
I think that I think it's more uncommon than common. I remember during the draft making a trade with the Patriots. We had Brandon Cooks, a receiver. We made a trade on draft day. And so, but this is the time of the year where, like, all the talent's not spread equally amongst the 32 teams. So some teams are a little heavier with a certain position, other teams maybe. And so you'll see player for player or player for pick. And teams are looking at rosters where they might be heavy in a certain area. And so that's not too difficult, but then identifying who is the bigger challenge for the team that's wanting to acquire a player. And so what was unique is two teams within the same 2 days, 3-day period, all calling on the same player.
Sean, will Atkins be medically viable for you to be on the roster right away?
Pardon way?
Atkins, would he medically be ready to be on the roster?
Yeah, and look, but I can't say he's going to be medically ready to play week 1, but close enough to where, we're probably going to hold him. And we discussed it the other day, he's going to beat the short-term IR, week 2, week 3. And so, and he's too good a football player for us. We're going to need him.
Do you have something on Jaleel?
Yeah, he had a baby.
I know.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yep. I think baby girl. I think he will. We're excited for him, his first. And I'm going to probably text him or call him when I get upstairs.
So I don't know if we've ever seen a division with the coaching pedigree that the AFC West has now. What do you enjoy or maybe not enjoy about facing?
I like I'm the youngest one. No, I look, and I can't speak for the other 3 coaches, but in all cases, there's been a staying power of success, and seeing Andy at Philadelphia, and the success there, and then obviously the success at Kansas City, Pete, the college level, and then coming to the NFL level, Super Bowls, winning Super Bowls. Jim, at the college level to begin with, and then the NFL level, and very quickly turning a 49er team around, and then very quickly turning a Charger team around. So there's great respect, and each week when you're playing a division opponent that they're going to be well prepared. And so I don't think the four of us decided we were all going to, kumbaya, and it ended up turning out this way. And so, yeah, would you rather have those coaches in other divisions? Sure. But that's the way it turned out.